Worked in Europe for 12 years, made 46 films over there,
My goodness.
and came back and went back a couple of times. And
Who would have thought that behind the rugged, charming image of Hollywood's heartthrob from the golden era lies a shocking secret? In little-known memoirs, Guy Madison not only confesses to having forbidden love affairs, but also reveals the identities of some famous homosexual stars of the time. Names once celebrated worldwide as ideal male role models. From the glittering sets to secret rendezvous in the shadows, Guy Madison's hidden love story unveils a Hollywood full of contradictions. A place where stars basked in the spotlight while concealing the truth about their real selves. Who were Guy Madison's secret lovers? And how will this story reshape our perception of the dream factory? The golden age of Hollywood was a time when the silver screen shimmered with legends. Men and women whose faces became symbols of an era, whose presence defined entire genres, and whose charisma left an imprint on generations of moviegoers. Among those unforgettable names stands Guy Madison, a star who embodied both rugged masculinity and quiet charm, a man whose story remains inseparable from the mythos of American cinema. Born Robert Ozell Mosley in 1922 in Bakersfield, California, Madison did not arrive in Hollywood through the usual doors of Broadway or vaudeville, nor was he groomed for stardom in elite acting schools. His path was one of chance, timing, and the magnetism of a natural screen presence. He was serving in the U.S. Navy during World War II when a simple twist of fate set his career in motion. While on leave in Los Angeles, Madison was noticed by a talent scout. His tall frame, striking jawline, and piercing eyes making him impossible to overlook. Hollywood, always hungry for new faces, saw in him the very archetype of the all-American leading man. What followed was the transformation of Robert Mosley into Guy Madison, a name destined to shine on marquees around the world. At the heart of Madison's appeal was his uncanny ability to embody the ideal of mid-century American manhood. Audiences of the 1940s and 1950s longed for figures who were both heroic and relatable. Men who carried the grit of the working class but wore it with an aura of romance. Madison was exactly that figure. His roles often cast him as the cowboy, the soldier, or the outdoorsman, characters whose lives demanded bravery, honor, and resilience. He was not flamboyant, nor was he given to theatrics. Instead, he radiated a quiet confidence, a sincerity that made viewers feel as though they were witnessing not just an actor at work, but a genuine man living out his principles on screen. The Western genre, booming in popularity during the post-war decades, became Madison's natural home. With his lean physique, strong shoulders, and square-jawed determination, he fits seamlessly into the dusty landscapes of frontier America. In films like Till the End of Time, and more prominently, through his starring role in the long-running television series The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, Madison brought to life the enduring legend of the cowboy. Part lawman, part wanderer, part romantic dreamer. The image of him in a wide-brimmed hat, revolver at his side, and a steady gaze fixed on the horizon became iconic. For many fans across America and abroad, Guy Madison was not just playing a Western hero. He was the Western hero. But his appeal extended beyond the rugged roles. Madison's striking good looks placed him among the pantheon of Hollywood heartthrobs, earning him the title of a matinee idol. Women adored him, men respected him, and studio executives recognized the rare balance he offered. He could carry a dramatic role with dignity, yet he could also light up the screen with a disarming smile. Critics often noted that his acting style leaned more on naturalism than flamboyance. He may not have been the most technically trained actor of his generation, but his authenticity was his strength. When Guy Madison spoke lines of loyalty, sacrifice, or love, audiences believed him. To understand Madison's cultural significance, one must also consider the context of his time. America in the 1940s and 1950s was a nation seeking stability, heroes, and reassurance after the turmoil of war. Cinema offered that comfort, and stars like Madison became embodiments of those ideals. He was the dependable figure who could be trusted to stand tall in the face of adversity, the romantic lead who reassured audiences that love, honor, and justice were not just fantasies but attainable truths. He was not just a man on a screen. He was, for many, the ideal of what a man could and should be. Yet, Madison's legacy cannot be reduced merely to his physical appeal or his Western roles. He was part of a generation of actors who helped television transition from novelty to cultural mainstay. The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, which ran throughout the 1950s, became a household favorite, and Madison's portrayal of the legendary lawman solidified his place in popular culture. The show was syndicated internationally, bringing his image to audiences in Europe, Latin America, and Asia, further expanding his fame. In post-war Italy, for example, Madison was adored as much as any local star, proving that his appeal transcended cultural boundaries. He was both a Hollywood product and a global phenomenon. As with many stars of his generation, Madison's career inevitably faced the shifting tides of Hollywood. The 1960s brought changes in cinematic tastes, and the traditional Western began to decline. New acting styles emerged, emphasizing raw intensity and psychological complexity over the classic stoicism of the Golden Age. While Madison never quite recaptured the superstardom of his earlier years, he continued to work steadily, transitioning into European cinema and maintaining a loyal fan base. His name, however, remained synonymous with the golden promise of mid-century Hollywood. Yet behind the glittering spotlight and the applause of packed theaters, Guy Madison's personal life unfolded in ways far less idyllic than the heroic figures he portrayed. Hollywood's golden age was not only a factory of dreams, but also a crucible that tested its stars with unrelenting pressure. Madison's journey through love and family was marked by both tenderness and turbulence, moments of deep connection and chapters of heartbreak that, in many ways, mirrored the dramatic arcs of the films in which he starred. In 1949, Madison entered into his first marriage with actress Gail Russell, herself a rising star whose delicate beauty and haunting performances had made her one of Hollywood's most promising talents. At first, the union seemed like something from a movie script. Two glamorous figures, admired by the public, finding each other in the whirlwind of stardom. Photographers captured them at premieres, hand in hand, their smiles suggesting the perfect Hollywood couple. Yet beneath that veneer lay a far more complex reality. Russell struggled with crippling stage fright and anxiety, which led her down a destructive path of alcohol dependency. Madison, who by nature was steady and reserved, tried to be her anchor. One could imagine him waiting late at night, pacing the living room of their Los Angeles home, hoping she would return sober, hoping that love might be enough to heal her. But Hollywood is often unkind to vulnerability. The strain became unbearable, and by 1954, their marriage had dissolved. The divorce was painful, not least because Madison was forced to watch Russell's further decline from afar. Though their lives separated, friends recalled that he carried a quiet sadness whenever her name was mentioned, a reminder of a love that might have been if only the pressures of fame had not been so merciless. Fate, however, had not closed the door on happiness. Later that same year, Madison married actress Sheila Connolly, a woman who brought both glamour and a stabilizing influence into his life. Their union produced 3 daughters, and for nearly a decade, Madison found himself playing a role that seemed almost foreign to the public, that of the doting father. Away from the cameras, he was said to spend weekends teaching his girls to ride ponies on the family ranch, or gathering them for impromptu picnics beneath the California sun. In an industry often defined by excess, Madison's devotion to fatherhood stood out as genuine and deeply human. Yet, even this chapter was not immune to the inevitable cracks that fame introduces into personal lives. The pressures of Madison's career, coupled with Connolly's own ambitions, created a widening distance between them. By 1963, their marriage, too, had come to an end. Friends close to the couple later speculated that Madison, despite his stoic public image, was quietly devastated by the dissolution of a family he had fought to hold together. The years that followed revealed a new, more vulnerable side of Madison. He entered into a relationship with Gia Scala, the stunning Italian-born actress whose star had risen in films like The Guns of Navarone. Their romance was passionate, almost cinematic in its intensity. Madison, often perceived as composed and reserved, seemed transformed in Gia's presence. They were seen together at parties in Rome and Los Angeles, often laughing, sometimes arguing, always magnetic. It was as though both had found in each other a mirror. Two souls shaped by Hollywood, both seeking solace from its relentless demands. But in 1972, tragedy struck. Gia Scala died at just 38 years old under circumstances that remain clouded in mystery. For Madison, it was a crushing blow. Friends later recalled how, in the months after her passing, he withdrew into himself, appearing at industry events with a haunted look in his eyes. He spoke rarely of her, but those who knew him best believed her loss was one of the great sorrows of his life, a grief that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Madison's family story, however, did not end in despair. One of the more intriguing chapters of his life unfolded in Europe, particularly Italy, where American Western stars often enjoyed extended fame through the booming popularity of spaghetti westerns. It was here that Madison's son, Robert Madison, pursued his own career in film. Robert, born from one of Madison's later relationships, embraced the legacy of his father, but sought to carve out his own identity on the screen. Italian audiences welcomed him warmly, not only as Guy Madison's heir, but as an actor in his own right. For Guy, the knowledge that his son had inherited his passion for cinema must have been a source of pride, a kind of poetic continuity that transcended his own struggles. One can imagine the elder Madison, perhaps sitting quietly in a small Roman cinema, watching his son's performance flicker across the screen, reflecting not only on the passage of time but on the endurance of legacy. As Guy Madison entered the twilight of his years, the man who had once embodied the myth of the indomitable cowboy seemed to step into a new role, one quieter, more reflective, and infinitely more human. After decades of riding across cinematic landscapes, his real-life journey brought him to the slower rhythms of ordinary days, yet even these years carried the weight of both dignity and sorrow. For a man who had given so much of himself to the screen, Madison now found himself navigating a different kind of stage, the intimate theater of aging, memory, and legacy. By the late 1970s and 1980s, Madison had largely retreated from Hollywood's relentless glare. He was no longer the face on every poster, nor the weekly television hero who once captivated millions. Instead, he embraced a quieter existence, dividing his time between California and Europe. Some imagined him walking through the streets of Rome, a city that had once adored him during his Italian film ventures, pausing at cafes where strangers still recognized him with a nod or a smile. He was never the sort of man to chase after lost fame. Rather, he seemed content to let his past roles speak for themselves, as though he knew that legends are not kept alive by constant appearances, but by the memories they inspire in those who watch them. Yet beneath this calm exterior, Madison's health was beginning to falter. Years of smoking, a common habit among actors of his generation, often even glamorized on screen, had taken their toll. Friends recalled his persistent cough, the way he would pause mid-conversation to catch his breath. Still, Madison carried himself with the same stoic composure that defined his characters. Rarely did he complain. Instead, he accepted his decline as another trail to ride, another frontier to face. One former co-star once remarked that even in illness, Guy still looked like a cowboy staring down the horizon, unafraid, steady, determined. But it was not only his body that bore the weight of years. His heart, too, carried the residue of loss. The memory of Gia Scala remained with him, and some whispered that he kept a photograph of her in his study, framed beside images of his daughters and his son Robert. Perhaps, in moments of solitude, he would look at that photo and recall not just her tragic death, but the laughter they once shared in Europe hotel rooms, or the soft conversations that stretched long into the night. To those who knew him, Madison was never a man of many words about his private grief, but his silence often spoke louder than any confession could. Despite his declining health, Madison remained active in his own quiet way. He attended Western film festivals and fan conventions, where admirers, some now grown old themselves, would approach him with trembling hands clutching faded posters or photographs. For them, he was not just an actor, but a link to their youth, to a time when heroes rode across technicolor landscapes and justice was as simple as a quick draw and a steady gaze. Madison, ever gracious, would smile, sign autographs, and listen to their stories. One fan later recalled how Madison, after signing a photograph, clasped his hand and said softly, "The heroes were never me. They were always in you, the audience. I just gave them a face." Whether or not he truly said it, such words capture the humility of a man who seemed to understand that his fame was a shared experience, not merely his own. By the mid-1990s, Madison's condition worsened. Diagnosed with emphysema and other complications of the lungs, he faced the inevitable decline of his body with the same quiet resilience that had carried him through life's earlier storms. In January 1996, at the age of 74, Guy Madison passed away in Palm Springs, California. News of his death spread quickly, and while the headlines were perhaps less thunderous than in his heyday, they were filled with reverence. Obituaries described him as a symbol of Hollywood's golden age, a man whose rugged features and steady presence had helped define an era of American film. Fellow actors and directors remembered him not just for his roles, but for his kindness, his professionalism, and his unassuming dignity. The funeral itself was modest, reflecting Madison's own nature. It was attended by family, close friends, and a handful of colleagues who had shared the screen with him. There were no elaborate Hollywood spectacles, no choreographed displays of celebrity mourning. Instead, there were heartfelt eulogies, memories exchanged in hushed tones, and tears shed by those who had known both the star and the man. One of his daughters spoke of her father not as the Hollywood icon, but as the man who once knelt beside her to fix a broken toy, who never missed a school recital when he could help it, and who, despite his fame, always made time to simply be Dad. For fans around the world, Madison's passing felt like the closing of a chapter in cinema history. In small towns across America, where reruns of The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok still flickered on late-night television, viewers mourned not only the actor, but the very innocence of an era he represented. In Italy, where his son Robert continued to act, newspapers carried headlines remembering Madison as the American cowboy who conquered Europe. It was a reminder that his legacy was not confined by geography. It was global, spanning across languages and generations. For decades, Guy Madison's public image remained polished, steadfast, and unmistakably masculine. The cowboy hero, the war veteran, the heartthrob of Hollywood's golden years. Yet as the years passed and the veil of secrecy that once cloaked Hollywood began to lift, fragments of a different, more intimate story emerged. These were not tales of his celebrated marriages or public romances, but of relationships whispered about in diaries, letters, and the recollections of those who knew him best. They revealed a side of Madison that, while carefully hidden during his lifetime, spoke to a man who sought not scandal, but genuine human connection in a world where love was often forbidden. In the strict, image-obsessed Hollywood of the 1940s and 1950s, the studios wielded immense power over their stars. Actors were commodities, and their personal lives were shaped to fit the narratives the public demanded. For a leading man like Madison, who embodied rugged heterosexual ideals on screen, any deviation from that carefully manufactured image would have been career-ending. Yet behind the fortress of studio control and societal judgment, Madison, like many of his contemporaries, lived with complexities that could not be publicly acknowledged. It is through later memoirs, private correspondence, and recollections of confidants that these hidden romances came to light. Among them were names that still resonate in Hollywood history, men whose careers, like Madison's, were defined by the tension between public image and private truth. One of the earliest rumored connections was with Ramon Navarro, the silent film star immortalized in Ben-Hur, 1925. Though Navarro's stardom had peaked long before Madison's, the two were said to have crossed paths at private gatherings of Hollywood insiders, exclusive dinner parties where actors, directors, and artists could breathe freely, away from the scrutiny of gossip columnists. In these circles, Navarro, older and world-weary, may have offered Madison not only companionship but also guidance on navigating the treacherous balance between authenticity and survival in Hollywood. Their bond, though fleeting, was remembered by some as one of mentorship and affection, a connection that left a quiet imprint on Madison's early years in the industry. More shocking to later generations was the suggestion of a romance with Tyrone Power. the matinee idol whose swashbuckling roles made him one of the most desired men of his time. Power, known for his charisma and devastating good looks, carried within him a private struggle, wrestling with desires and relationships that he could never openly acknowledge. Letters and anecdotes suggest that his connection with Madison was one of intense intimacy, the kind of relationship where two men, both icons of masculinity, found in each other a mirror of their hidden selves. Their time together was said to be sporadic, shaped by the demands of film schedules and the ever-present fear of exposure. Yet it revealed the courage of two men who dared, if only in secrecy, to embrace something real. Then there was Anthony Perkins, decades younger than Madison, whose breakout role in Psycho, 1960, would cement him as one of Hollywood's most enigmatic stars. Perkins himself lived a life marked by duality, struggling against the expectations of his profession while yearning for love beyond society's approval. Accounts suggest that Madison and Perkins shared a brief but passionate romance, one charged with the vitality of youth on Perkins' side and the steady allure of experience on Madison's. It was, as some described, a collision of fire and stone, brief, intense, and unforgettable. Though their paths soon diverged, Perkins reportedly carried memories of Madison with him, referring to him in private as someone who offered tenderness during a turbulent chapter of his life. Perhaps the most poignant of these hidden connections was with Rock Hudson, the towering Hollywood star who, like Madison, became a symbol of heterosexual romance on screen while concealing a very different truth off it. Hudson and Madison's relationship, according to those who later spoke of it, was not a long public affair, but rather a series of stolen moments, vacations under the guise of camaraderie, late-night drives along the California coast, secret getaways to Palm Springs. Both men understood the stakes. Discovery could shatter their careers, their reputations, their carefully constructed personas. Yet within those private hours, away from cameras and contracts, they shared something genuine. One can imagine Madison, seated on a porch with Hudson under a desert sky, the air filled with silence and unspoken words, each man grateful for the simple freedom to just be. What is striking about these stories is not their scandal, but their humanity. Madison himself, in private reflections later shared by close friends, insisted that his relationships, be they with men or women, were never about sensation or rebellion. They were about love, he was said to remark, about the moments when two souls recognize each other, even if the world cannot. In a society that demanded silence, Madison's quiet defiance was not in flamboyance, but in the simple act of loving sincerely, however secretly. These hidden romances add new depth to Madison's legacy. They reveal a man who, beneath the public armor of the cowboy hero, lived a life of emotional complexity, one defined as much by secrecy as by sincerity. They remind us that even the brightest stars of Hollywood were not immune to the very human desire for connection, nor to the pain of having to conceal it. For Madison, love was both a refuge and a risk, an echo of the countless roles he played, where danger and longing often went hand in hand. The story of Guy Madison shows us a Hollywood that is not only about glamour, but also about secrets, pain, and silent sacrifice. His life is not only a journey of a star, but also a testament to the desire to love and be true to oneself, even in an era full of prejudice. What do you think about Guy Madison's secret love affairs and the gay stars of Hollywood in the past? Leave a comment below to discuss. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss other fascinating stories about the world of celebrities.